something else that you've been watching, which I've actually fully dropped after its first season, and that's Sabrina the Teenage Witch, or what is it, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Yeah, the
Um,
Chilling Adventures of
yeah,
Sabrina, which honestly isn't that chilling. Once again, I think like obviously I'm a bit biased because I like watching, or I'm invested in like Archie comics. As for people who don't know, I like art comics, and therefore, I'm also a big fan of like, Riverdale, and purely because I read the comics growing up. And so therefore, for me, um, when Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is like, oh, well, let's see what's the manifestation of this character and see where it comes to this season. A lot of this, so in the previous season, there's like a big kind of twist where Sabrina finds out that she's technically the daughter of Satan and not, and her quote unquote biological father isn't her real father. Kind of a devil's deal thing.
get it,
Um,
Devil's Deal.
Devil's deal. But yeah, like in the subsequent season, she works with Lilith in order to trap Satan and give her like the reins of hell. But unfortunately, it just kind of leads, and her then boyfriend becomes like the new prison of Satan, so to speak. So and is entrapped in hell. But all that kind of gets resolved within the first two episodes. Like she goes in, saves him. Oh, now she has to like compete to be like the queen of hell with some other guy, some other hot dude who's there. Like, because obviously there's going to be
We need
more.
a love triangle of tension here over here.
Exactly. Um,
Are you sure this
and
wasn't made on the CW?
I don't know. Well, it's Netflix. Like Netflix owns Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, but the thing is, there is a crossover between the two. Now, we're going to be talking about it in Riverdale very soon, because we've both been watching that. But in one of the episodes, Betty kind of interviews a bunch of uh, football players who've been injured during their games, and one of them is the character from uh, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, who's wearing the same actor wearing the same Letterman jacket. That's technically the Letterman jacket from Greendale. So they both exist in the same universe because they also mention what is it? The Blossoms, because the Blossoms is in the possession of like one of the unholy artifacts that she needs to find in a competition. So that's like another reference to like Riverdale series. And then lastly, in another episode, a Southside serpent comes into a store and gets eaten by like one of the characters. I wouldn't say which one, but one of them. There is, and so he's got like the jacket and everything. So there is definitely like a crossover of some kind, or maybe it's like alternate universe. I don't know how it works or how it functions, but it's functioning in some way.
Well, we do.
Um,
Well, we do know for a fact that the I think it's pretty much airing today is the Katie Keene spin-off that's coming out. I think like today or something
mhm.
like that. So
Yeah,
maybe they're having their own little like mini multi-universe type
cinematic
of thing, cinematic
universe.
universe.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing. Like, I think that's kind of how you want to do. Well, I mean, shows used to do this in the past as well. Like, you had like Star Trek that had like I think three shows concurrently, interacting with characters interacting with each other. I think like it was either like Next Gen, Enterprise, and the one after Next Gen. Like they were both running at the same time, and so there was crossover between these kind of ships and these arcs and stuff like that. Like there's ways to do it, and it's a good way to get people to watch shows. Because I think in the latest episode of Riverdale, they actually had Katie Keene as a like a guest star. So it's like supposed to be like, hey, you're the new chick, and this is gonna be like a pilot episode, much like they did for the Flash in Arrow, right? But yeah, just to kind of go back to Sabrina, the kind of interesting thing is like they are setting it up for like a Cthulhu kind of mythos thing, which is technically in line with like some of the kind of Archie horror comics, where in one of the comics, which is based off, I think it's called Afterlife with Archie, which is where all there's a zombie infection that Jughead causes because his dog dies and he asks Sabrina to bring the dog back alive from the dead, and the dog bites him. He becomes a zombie. starts infecting everyone, Sabrina's like, oh shit, what have I done? But then it turns out, oh wait, she was supposed to cause this because she's basically becoming the bride of Cthulhu, which is Lovecraftian horror. Look it up. H.P.
I think a
Lovecraft.
lot of people know about H.P. Lovecraft. I would assume, or at least Cthulhu, because that's
Cthulhu,
obviously the main.
you
That's the main ones that everyone knows. You know.
Yeah. So I think they are kind of borrowing aspects of that because there is like a creature that I think is like they refer to him as like the deep ones or like these like sea creatures, and that's kind of like the followers of Cthulhu. They kind of mention him at the beginning, but then there's like this other kind. I think they call him pagan witches, right? That kind of move into Greendale because they kind of kick Satan out. Satan's like, hey, I'm not giving you guys my power anymore. Fuck you, witches. And so they're all underpowered, and they have to try and fight off these pagan witches who believe in like another god, which I think is supposed to be a reference to other Cthulhu-esque myths. I don't know if you watched True Detective, right?
Yes.
So in True Detective they talk about like the Yellow Man, and they talk about Carcosa, which is like the place in which they in the show. It's like a detective show, and it's where they like kind of kidnap children to like sexually molest them and stuff like that. Carcosa is essentially like a fictional world created by like an author that later got like adopted and used for like kind of Lovecraftian kind of horror mythos as well. And so one of the characters is called Carcosa, and instead of like the Yellow King, it's like they refer to like an entity called the Green Man, which I think in a very similar way is supposed to be like a similar kind of like beyond comprehension scary monster, right? But then towards the end of the season they kind of set up for like, oh well, more bad shit's going to happen in the future. So again, I think the problem is the show still has the same problems where it's like characters, I hate it all the time where it's like shows will have these plot contrivances where like they don't communicate everything properly. They forget really simple things that should be really apparent. It's all these kind of typical teeny stuff that I always, teeny also like as in small, but also like as in teenager shit. That's really, really bad. But the thing is, like, I think ultimately,
I didn't tell like, it's not what it looks like type of thing.
Or
is it more just like I didn't tell you that? Because I think my whole thing is like, and I heard because like my sister was watching it as well, something along the lines of like, yeah, the friends of Sabrina are just really annoying. So I'm assuming it's a lot of friend drama. It's like, oh, why are you hanging out with them? Like you feel like you're rejecting us. Is it that type of thing? Where it's like you're hanging out with the cool group and not hanging out with us. Is that?
There was a little bit of that, but that's like not like a very relevant thing in the story. I think the friends were more annoying last season and the season before that, whereas this season, like, now that they're more established, they have like a more important role, if that makes sense. Because like one of them has the ability to like use her, even though
it was in like what foresight or something like that.
Yeah, she has like the ability to like kind of have like premonitions in a sense, right? But yeah, like even she doesn't really get utilized either. And Harvey, like the main love interest, like he always carries around a pickaxe when it comes to like all the battles, which seems really impractical. It's like, I get it, like, yeah, you work out a mine, you could still use an axe or something, right? But yeah, I think the thing is, like, I wouldn't recommend this show unless if you like the Archie comic series and stuff like that. It obviously has problems, but I'm willing to torture myself and watch it.
Well, that's the thing. How do you rate this show? Because like it's like, from what I'm understanding, you're kind of enjoying it, but you kind of like,
yeah, it's like a
love-hate relationship. It sounds like,
because it's like the thing is like the casting and everything's really great. It's just like the story and the implementation of the actually the story ideas are really good. It's the execution of those stories that are either done really poorly or really rushed. Because and I mean, this is the thing. All the CW shows and all these kind of like shows that are aimed with drama as a motif, they all have this problem. I think the problem is like there's a lot of really good ideas. It's just they should have been rushed. Like all the stuff that I was telling you about, like the pagan witches, that should have been the focus of the entire season, or the entire focus should have been about this competition that Sabrina is having in hell, not both, not how she's trying to go back and forth, and I think that's the point. Like in the end, like there's a time paradox that happens. They go back and they do an end game and they go back in time, and I'm like, man, they're doing this too much. Like all this stuff, right? Like it's
like breaking continuity almost.
No, not that. It's just using time travel as a means to like fix things.
Yeah, and obviously that, and then when that comes into play, like power creep will come in, and it's just kind of like at that point, any serious situation that you would have, you can easily fix it, and then obviously they have to take away the power at some point, right?
Well, yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like essentially, like everybody gets killed by the pagan witches. Sorry, spoilers, right? Everybody
Don't worry,
gets
I was
killed.
gonna watch it.
Well, spoilers for people who are listening, I guess. She manages, so everybody dies, but then she goes back in time and manages to kind of save everyone, but she doesn't maintain the time loop that let her escape in the first place. She causes a time paradox, because anyways, the point is there ends up being two, and she says, hey, you wanted to go rule in hell, so why don't you go rule in hell and I'll stay here on earth. So the problem is there's now two Sabrinas, and because she did this, the this is the thing that's kind of good with time travel, is like there are usually consequences for going back in time, and the consequence of what she did and saving everyone is now it's going to lead into like the big Cthulhu god thing. I think the problem is, I think the idea is really cool, but I think it's going to be executed really badly. But I'm still willing to kind of blast through it.
But what makes you think that? Is it just because they're just not setting it up properly, or is it just, do you feel like this show and its tone does not have the, you know, the I guess
it's not the tone. I think it's just whoever's directing and whoever's like kind of writing the show, they have the good ideas, but the execution of those ideas are bad. That's it. Like
it's like they get the cliff notes of like all the good stories of Sabrina, but then they're just like, I don't know, like middle
not
part.
Even that, like not even that. I don't even remember them talking about pagan witches in any of the previous books, but it's like the idea is really cool because it's like, because it kind of like contrasts with like religion, like how there's pagan religion, and there's like a kind of what you would consider to be like Abrahamic religions, or like a kind of institutionalized religions, and they're kind of considered like the proper and moral way to follow a religion, right? You know, whether you want to say like Christianity or Judaism or Islam, right? Like all these religions, like they all look down on people who do pagan or idol worshipping and stuff like that. So in a very similar way, you have like another group of witches that kind of come in who pray to like a different god to get their power. And they have different abilities that, you know, the witches aren't aware of. But they look down, like when they see them as like pagan witches, like, oh shit, like we killed, like these witches like killed all these pagan witches once like Satan came into power, right? So now that Satan doesn't exist, all the pagans have come out of the woodwork, and that's the point. But like even my description of this is doing way more justice than how it's kind of executed in the show. Like it's almost like done in like
instead of like
seconds.
Building it up as a threat, or like, oh, how are we gonna tackle him,
like,
or how big
well,
how serious is it? They're just like, yeah, whatever.
They are built as a threat. It's the problem is like they're scary, but then they don't really do anything for the most part. Like yeah, they eventually like get what they want in the end and get, you know, certain things, but they're not like a constant threat throughout the actual show, as opposed to like, you know, even like certain things like you know, I think in the last season there was like an episode where they get attacked by witch hunters, I think. Oh, maybe that was in the first season, I don't know, but like that episode like was like, oh holy shit, like there's like people who can actually kill witches. Like it's pretty crazy. But yeah, like unfortunately, like a lot of the story does like a bad job at trying to make you feel like, oh, there's going to be a lot of consequences for what happens. A lot of the time, And I think this is a big problem, is that Sabrina will just come in and she'll just demand what she wants and she'll get it. And it's just like, you don't, what? Like, no, you're supposed to
there needs to be some sort of earning or drama to
or
get
a trial to get, and there are literal trials in this.
I do remember that this show had a lot of different like trials. Like it didn't.
Yeah, but but I think the thing is like, a lot of it is just like it. It is kind of Mary Sue-ish, but I think at the same time, like you are building. So Sabrina is, throughout the show is shown to be pretty adept at magic, but at the same time, like you do make her out to be this super big, scary threat, because if she does turn evil, she would actually be like a pretty like
she's but that's the thing, is she powerful without knowing it versus she's powerful?
No, she knows it. No, she knows it. Yeah, it's very much, and she knows it. But yeah, again, I wouldn't recommend this show for people unless you're interested in the kind of Sabrina mythos and this kind of horror vibe to it. I think again, like the other problem I have with it is, they like, oh, the Satan people do really bad things, and we're surprised. Why? You're literally in hell. What do you think?
Literally, like praising Satan.
Yeah, and it's like, what do you think they're supposed to do? It's like, oh well, we're no longer going to be killing innocent people and taking their souls or something like that. Like, but isn't that the point of like hell? It's people selling their souls, And
I think that's the hardest part of adapting, like making like people who worship the devil or something, like as in like
good.
The good guys.
Yeah,
it's like the hardest thing.
They're not.
And that's the thing. There has to be a worse person or something like that. But even then, it's still objectively bad, So I feel like that's what they've written themselves in a hole in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And so unfortunately, they kind of, again, it has a bit of an identity as well. So again, watch out, you're in peril. But again, I like it because I'm okay with saying that this is a trash show and enjoying the trashiness for it.
Yes,